obscure world of parking. We use it every day, but have we really capitalized on the intricacies of our industry? In this podcast, the Parking Network will go behind the scenes and talk to industry professionals about all things parking, from the horizon of evolving technology and even stories of the old days. We hope to encourage and inspire operators and property managers alike to look at parking through a new lens. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Our Parking Industry Podcast. I am Krista Olien, and I'm here with Clyde Wilson and Leigh Thomas. We are doing a follow-up episode about the conversation with Nick Nicholas, where Leigh Thomas and Trina Tudor had the opportunity to interview him. He is a police captain on the West Coast, and he works for a municipality that is in charge of all things parking, which I know some of you can relate to. He's very passionate about the enforcement piece and the safety piece and how to keep our frontline workers safe and the difficult jobs that they're doing, and garner the respect that they deserve for the difficult job that they're doing. So we had a great conversation. It was great to listen to Leigh and Trina get to speak with him, and we have some things we'd like to talk about, all things on-street parking. So one of my biggest takeaways was that enforcement is a difficult job. It puts you between someone who is guaranteed to be upset, but you also have a job to do to enforce the parking for the betterment of your community. So one of the things that he liked to talk about was the training and kind of the difficulties that come with that and how we can better serve our people that are in those roles, in those positions as municipalities. So Clyde or Leigh, do y'all have any comments on that piece of the conversation?
I really appreciated his willingness to speak about something that we talk about at TPN really often, which is parking is a difficult job. And he's willing to talk about what it's like for our frontline employees to be out in the business of parking enforcement and how it is not easy. So I appreciated him bringing that conversation to light. It seems like he has that conversation a lot. And I think we are all looking for ways for the parking industry to have a more positive connotation and maybe some higher self-worth as we're doing the job that we do. So I appreciated that very much. I also appreciated words like resiliency and vitality, which he mentioned. Just a kind of a reminder that we need to be taking care of ourselves so that we can do a great job. We can mature the industry. We can do hard things. Those were, I think, really valuable conversations to have. And then, of course, something that we talked about with Julie earlier in this season, and we talk about at the TPN table often, is that parking should be easy. It should be forgettable. It should be something that we don't worry about. We just go park and then do the stuff of life. So I have a lot of questions today about on-street. How can we make on-street parking forgettable? How can we just park and do business and not have a heartache because we have to go find a parking spot? So that was some of my takeaways.
To clarify quickly, we're going to use the terms on-street and municipality somewhat interchangeably. Municipality parking refers to the entity that monitors, controls, and maintains the on-street parking that we're going to discuss. On-street is a broad category, and it influences municipalities as well as universities, which have similar struggles. So as we go through this episode, we'll kind of use both of those terms semi-interchangeably, but know that we know on-street has a broader application.
I thought that it was very interesting to listen to his conversation because he comes from the police side, and a lot of on-street or municipal parking falls underneath the police department. So it's not terribly unusual, which gives that different perspective slightly of what they see. As long as I can remember, on-street parking has been a challenge, and it has always been a challenge. And we at TPN over the years dealt so much with commercial side. We really never did spend the time to get into on-street. However, we paid close attention to it. And it's always been a difficult subject, and there are a number of reasons. And I know at some point here, we're going to kind of jump into those temporarily to talk about some of the broader issues. I thought one of the things that we would only get from the police side that he brought to the table is the awareness of what's around you and the number of enforcement officers who get something more than just somebody yelling at them. It goes further than that. And I really had not ever thought about that. So I thought that was a great point to bring out, because while I've worked downtown, I learned to be aware of what was going on around me, because a lot of times the people that worked for me were picking up cash at all times of the day and night, and you really had to be aware of what was going on around you. So that was a good lesson to hear again. I hadn't thought about it in many, many years, but today with the enforcement people on the streets, writing tickets, getting people mad at them, and some people, as we see today on the streets all the time, are willing to fight over it. So being aware of what's around you is terribly, terribly important. So I enjoyed that part very much.
One thing I know Leigh talks a lot about her history as a teacher and how she relates it. Whenever I was going through my pedagogy training, one of the tools that we were always taught was if you have a student that's disruptive or causing a problem or any of the above, proximity was always really important. So if you were close to the student or close to the issue that might arise, proximity could often deter that. So if they just knew that you were there, if they knew about your presence, it would alleviate any event from happening or help it in a way. So I think about that in application to parking in parking facilities. We talk about safety. We talk about how important it is for parkers to feel safe, and they will prefer a garage where they feel safe over a garage where they don't. The same is true for an on-street area. If there's a street where they know that there's constantly enforcement happening, there's someone there looking at parking, looking at the cars, versus a side street where maybe the enforcement doesn't usually go because it's not so popular or whatever the case may be, that can deter things. And so the social awareness of the parker knowing that there is someone from enforcement or someone looking out, just paying attention, goes a long way. So I think the two sides of that are very interesting and the connection between the two. So they're out doing their job, they're aware of their surroundings as they're applying enforcement, but then that also helps the parkers feel at ease too, in a way.
Krista, I think that's a great point. We want more and more great customers who appreciate the work that we do. And one of the many steps involved in getting more and more great customers is to make sure they all realize when I'm downtown, getting out of my car, when I'm fairly vulnerable, I may have kids in the car, I may have my back to the world to some degree, that I'm safe. And I hadn't really thought about it that way, but it's the same as in off-street parking where we want garages to be clean. It tells me somebody's around here, well lit, tells me you can see me. Seeing people tells me I'm safe. There's somebody can help me. So those are important out on the streets. It's such a big world out there. It's very difficult. It kind of comes down to the customer who's going to yell and fight you over a parking ticket. You don't really need them anyway. But let's worry about the good customers, make sure they're happy and safe. So I thought that was a great point you just brought up. We need to continue to work at making it a safe place for our customers.
So what does that balance look like? If we're talking about technology, Leigh touched on being able to remove people from different roles that now technology is taking over. And as she said, the technology shouldn't replace the people. It should allow the people to do the people jobs. So what does that look like as we implement more technology and we take out some of these physical parking enforcement tools and we implement more technology-based parking tools where I'm quickly jumping out of my car and applying the ticket that I just printed off my machine while I'm sitting in my car? What does that look like in that respect?
Well, municipals are very heavily budget issues, so you have to stay within the budget. We hear this all the time that these technologies are taking jobs away. No, they're really not. If you think through it, they're really not. All they're doing is putting a focus on these jobs that are very important mechanically, and your eyes can stay over here. So just because you have enforcement cars driving down the street with license plate readers on them, looking for somebody who's cheating, and they're leaving and the ticket comes in the mail, doesn't mean you can't hold on to that budget and keep that enforcement officer budget for just plain eyes on the street. And every one of the cities know. They know it. They know the streets that are more vulnerable to a problem than the ones that are not. We've done all this and we're going to automatically write tickets over here, but I want my enforcement officers on the streets. How are you going to hold on to that? Because somebody on city council is going to say, why are we spending money on these? You told me this would do better over here, and we would automatically write tickets. Why are you doing this? So the part that I think TPN has always done a good job of helping parking operators prepare for one of our bad audits to the building owners to explain, here's how that happened and here's how we can prevent that. We've tried to do that over the years, and I think it's always worked, except in a couple of instances where we have people who were just impossible.
Do you remember when we were giving our presentation at NPA and our presentation moved into this idea of how technology is not going to replace the people? Do you remember the gentleman who stood up and interrupted? That was such a panic moment for me. Like I had like an empty thought bubble above my head. Like I have no idea what to say to deal with this. But I do want our listeners to hear that, especially if you have an RFP out and you have vendors respond to that with the promise that if you buy this technology, your people budget can be reduced by this much because you won't need as many people if you buy this wonderful new technology. Please hear a bit of a warning from our team that is probably not accurate. You're probably going to need to keep your personnel. The technology is going to come in and it's going to change what your people do, but you're still going to need people. And this is what Clyde talked about just a moment ago. And he says often, this technology is actually demanding more of our people, especially our leaders. You've got to be able to manage technology and also retrain your people for maybe a very different job, because technology can do the computer thing, but your people need to be able to do the people things. So please keep that in mind as you're choosing vendors for your facility or your operation. And don't be quick to choose a vendor because it promises to replace people.
One of the most important parts of that is we go to conventions and we do our job day to day, but we go to conventions, we see presentations, we read the magazine articles, and there's a lot of this, the technology is going to do this and do that and replace people. The reality is, and I learned this kind of, I don't know whether it was the easy way or the hard way, in the development of Focus Point. Now, Focus Point's job was to go into a location and do two things: improve revenues and decrease on-site operating expenses. It decreased expenses, but I brought it back to a command center where I had more professional people at a higher level dealing with us. But the important part of this is the same thing with on-street. Revenue increased by 18 to 20% at every location we touched. So the technology that we brought to the table didn't really terribly reduce expenses. It moved it, but in moving it, that technology dramatically improved the revenue. So if you're going to go spend money to buy technology, the people on the front lines out there have to be able to look at a city council or the people inside the city that they're working for and convince them this is a good purchase. Well, it's not a good purchase if you don't talk about the revenue side and your only benefit is, well, we're going to get rid of people over here, but I can't really afford to do that, so I've got to keep them. Well, you've got yourself into a lock where you're not going to get the money you want to be able to do all these things. So the reality is, whatever technology you're buying, and I've looked at, I think all of us here as a group have looked at and spend more time looking now at some of the things that are happening on the street. All of those things should be dramatically improving technology. One of the biggest problems in on-street parking across the country, and not everybody will admit this, but I think we all know the truth, is that you write millions and millions and millions of dollars in parking tickets during the course of every year that you don't ever collect. Technology should help you collect those. And technology should help you actually write more tickets because you're able to move faster through on-street parking. You're able to grab more license plates. You're able to get to the bottom line. And I think being efficient without being confrontational helps more and more of the good parkers be there and be willing to pay for parking. It's not taking people away. It should reposition them. Your real benefit to technology is you're just going to collect more money.
Yeah. What comes to mind for me is you're taking what you should look for whenever a technology vendor is sales pitching to you is that the technology will make your frontline people or your people in your corporate level more efficient, but not obsolete. So if they're selling that it's going to make people obsolete, that's a red flag. So watch out for that. We want our people to be more efficient because of the tools that the technology is providing, not this promise that people will be obsolete because the technology will do it all. In the future, we may be there at some point in some facilities where that can happen, but it doesn't apply to everything. Another thing that came up whenever you were talking, Clyde, was the vastness of on-street parking and the challenges that kind of brings. So I don't just mean the vastness of the types of on-street parking, I mean literally how spread out on-street parking is. Whenever we think about commercial office buildings and parking facilities associated with them, there's one, two, maybe three entry points. So you can capture every single person coming into that garage. On street parking, you have to be able to capture a whole street times 10, times 20, times 40, times 100, depending on how big your municipality is. The concept of enforcement and LPR is very different. The conversation has to be very different than it is for parking garages. One of the things that I wanted to touch on was in municipalities, this kind of lack of pressure for growth and development. What does that mean for on-street municipality and universities alike? What does this lack of pressure look like?
Lack of pressure about improving technologies.
Yeah, improving technologies and lack of competition between other parking vendors. The real goal in municipality parking or on-street parking is to get people to park successfully, but if they don't, kind of this critical enforcement piece. But there's no true capitalism as far as municipalities. There's not vendors competing except for the technology.
Right. The technology vendors are very, very competitive, but you're right. If you're a municipal parking director in the city of, and I'll use California as an example because the Los Angeles area is an example because there are so many municipalities around Los Angeles. So if you're in the city of Santa Monica, you could care less what was happening in Los Angeles. It doesn't affect you. If you're in the city of Burbank, you don't care what's happening in Santa Monica. So you're not competing with them. Your job, and I think I can say this correctly, your job is to compete to some degree with the city council because people speak before the city council and the city council comes back to you. So your job is to keep it where the city council isn't mad because you guys did something. You guys have probably never seen it, but when there's a city council meeting going on, behind the curtains in the back room is the parking director just waiting. And each of the departments within the city, there's a back room full of people sitting around back there. And they're waiting for a question to come up about parking. Soon as somebody comes up and says, I got a ticket and it was terrible, out behind the curtain, here comes the parking director to get ready to answer this off-the-cuff question that they have from somebody that's mad in the audience. And believe me, because I've worked with a couple of municipalities over the years, I've sat in that back room waiting to see if we were going to get a question and watching everybody back there. And it's a difficult place to be sometimes, especially with parking, because people are generally not happy with us. So the competition is internal. It's internal with your budget. It's internal with the city council. It's internal with the directors of different departments that you may be impacting. It's an internal pressure where commercial parking operation is true capitalism. It's an external pressure. I've got to get my cars to leave your garage and come to mine. And I've got to be able to charge enough that I make more money, but they don't run back over to you. So it's just a totally different animal. The first parking tax city that we did was the city of Miami. And they were so desperate because they'd spent all their money. They came out with a 25% parking tax. Well, the world just went crazy and they were having trouble collecting it. The operators were hiding it. It was so much they didn't want to give that up. And so then we were hired to come in and manage the parking taxes. And within a year, what we realized was we need to be sure we know who's parking downtown. So they added to our contract that we had to go and do license plate surveys, and then they gave us access to the license plate information. So we had to do license plate surveys of all the cars, and not all the cars, we selected different places within the city of Miami, and then track them down and see where they lived. And we found out that only 20-something% of the people that worked in downtown Miami lived in the city of Miami. So the city council instantly said, well, screw them. 80% of the people here aren't voters. We'll do whatever we want. So it really changed the city council's position on dealing with these complaints on the parking tax issue. You're not a voter. I don't care. Go complain to somebody else. But I've never seen a city do that before. And I think it was new to them, but it was such an enlightening piece of information that we found. Then I start realizing, that may be the case in a lot of cities, to where, depending on how they're structured, the people who work downtown may not live downtown, they commute. So they may not live inside the city. So they're not voters, but some are. So anyway, I just thought it'd be an interesting topic to bring up because we thought it was so funny. We weren't sure what we were going to learn, but when we did it and we got the answers, it was such an interesting answer to all the people in the city council.
Well, and that just confirms something that we talk about a lot with our clients is the first step is knowing your customers. Who is parking on your streets? And then make decisions based on that data. And that's what technology is doing for us right now, is it is allowing us to know who is parking on the streets. Okay, so Clyde, correct me where I'm misunderstanding. It sounds like On Street has had challenges for a very long time and the same challenges.
Yes.
In your opinion today, what would move the gauge? Like, what would increase the pressure of municipality and university parking to increase revenue, to increase leadership, to decrease confrontation, increase efficiency? Like, let's talk about the best parking of tomorrow. What does that look like?
Well, we talk about a lot of this stuff over the time when we as a group talk together, and we always learn something about this. It's really interesting the way you asked the question and then the way my thought process changed as I was listening to the question, because it's really two parts, but we only think of it as one. The real part, the part that most people think about is, and I don't want to get into the details on this because we could talk about this literally for a month, but up until just recently, it hasn't been that many years, if you parked at a meter downtown, you had to have quarters. When I would fly to Miami, because I was on Miami Beach a lot, because I was calling on them, we had some locations over there. My first stop from the airport was the bank. I went in with a couple of 20s and got rolls of quarters, got $10 rolls of quarters, because I was going to need them. The challenge was people don't have enough quarters and they end up getting a $25 ticket simply because they didn't have enough quarters. We didn't do anything downtown to make sure there were quarters everywhere. So I learned the hard way after a few tickets. I'm just going to the bank. When I get off the plane, rental car, drive across the bridge, there was a bank there. I knew it. I went there to get the tickets. The other thing is signs all over the place downtown on the streets. And so the signs, we all know in the parking business, we all know people do not read signs. They pull into a garage. They're interested to make sure they don't hit the entrance. They drive in. They do what they have to do. The gate goes up and they go park. They don't read signs. But on-street parking is full of signs. There's a sign way up there on the left-hand corner that says, no on-street parking after 4 p.m. I didn't see it. I wasn't looking for it. It's an on-street parking with a meter, and I got to go to that building, and that's where I was going. And then there's another sign over there that says, this space reserved for FedEx or delivery trucks. There's not a parking spot within 4 blocks of this place. I've circled the block, and that one's open. I'm going there. And then I get a ticket. I'm just covering a tiny bit of it. But we did all of these things to make people mad. We didn't do it intentionally to make them mad, but we did these things, and they were all over the country, in every city, all over the place. There were signs over there that says 20-minute limit. I didn't see it, but I thought I was just going to run into the store and I would be out in a few minutes anyway. I didn't get out in time, and so then I got a ticket. And one of the parking tickets that I got, I remember this one to this day, and this was in like 1985. I was about to leave downtown and go out to meet somebody outside the city. It was in the afternoon, and I was already in my car, and I pulled over. There was a space right there available, and the Chase Bank was right there. The ATM machine was right there. I pulled into this empty space, got out, ran over to the ATM machine. This was a 3-minute transaction. There was a parking enforcement officer standing over there hiding on the corner, waiting on the people who were going to use that space to go to an ATM machine. She got the ticket written and turned around and smiled at me just as I came back to the car. Even during those days, there were things that could have been done that weren't, to eliminate or scale down some of the need or the reasons for people to get tickets. And they weren't. And today, it's the same. We have all kinds of new technologies coming out there. But you know what's, I think, the biggest that we as a group see, these technologies are hard. And we've seen companies, I won't mention who it is, but I was just 6 months ago in a discussion of a bunch of municipal parking operators and a few university parking operators talking about this particular vendor. And I was listening to them talk, and I finally asked them all a question and mentioned the name, and they just all blew up because it was so bad. All that is that's an issue. We're not doing a good job of being a buyer. We're not really asking the right questions. We're not spending the time with the vendor to evaluate, can they solve my problem without creating another group of problems. So for us, TPN, as we look at it, we see this, we talk about this a lot. One of the single biggest issues is, and we probably need to just create our own program for teaching people, but we've got to be better buyers. We've got to learn how to look at, there's one parks company out there right now that I dealt with in 2019. And I just saw another parking company brought them on as their primary parks equipment supplier. And when I was looking at them in 19, they were not from here, they were overseas. I called somebody because I got suspicious. I called somebody in the parking world in that part of the world. They investigated them for me and came back and said, Clyde, do you want me to just call the police and have them arrested? These people don't have anything. They're just telling everybody they do. And it's easy to come to America and say, I have all this stuff and not really have it because nobody here investigates. And that's still going on a lot. So we have to be better at this. And when you're buying technology that's coming in from overseas, it's really hard to investigate it, but it's also really hard to clean up the mess from making these mistakes. So there's a lot to be done. And I think on-street equipment, parking technology has a greater impact and is more difficult to manage than any of the on-street issues or off-street issues. Us in managing garages, it's a totally different management structure and how you do that versus what you do downtown. And so it's hard. It's a really hard job. There's so many places in it that needs specific help.
Absolutely. Leigh mentioned earlier the RFP process and how difficult that is for consumers. And if you are a municipality, a university, a commercial office manager, the globalization of our technology, just like the story Clyde was telling, is a challenge in and of itself. And choosing the best vendor for you it takes a lot of work, a lot of research, a lot of discovery. You can't just take the submission and choose based upon what's written in black and white on the paper you receive. Whenever we run an RFP, we always invite people that are exploring a different parks equipment or operator to go observe another location where it's already being utilized. Talk to the property owners and managers that are already there about their experience with the technology that this company is considering. So have those conversations, do the research, explore. Don't just take the seller's word for it, if you will. Whenever we think about on-street parking, we could have a plethora of conversations about universities, municipalities. So we probably will need to come back to this subject on another episode. Thank you all for being here on the Our Parking Industry podcast, and we hope you'll join us next time.
Thank you.
To quote one of the greatest business minds of our time, Charles Munger, he said, "The best thing a human can do is help another human being know more." Here on Our Parking Industry podcast, we want to provide knowledge and resources. If you heard something that sparked your curiosity in today's episode, please reach out on our socials at TPN Consulting. You can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe and follow. See you next time on Our Parking Industry.